Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on the talent economy from AI to Amla is a conscious innovations. So we have our world famous speakers, uh, Mr. Bruce Lee, Madam Ali Rice, our fellow Mr. Robin Lee and Mr. David Smith. So my first question for this panel, especially I want to start with Bruce. How does the transition from artificial intelligence to conscious innovation redefine the role of human talent in future economy?
Well, I've from what I've gathered here, this is going to just make things a lot better with the removal. What I'm reading right now. It talks about um, a removal of toxicity and bias. Like some of these things, um, it's just brilliant. I wish I was more familiar so I could give a better response. I actually had questions prepared myself, but I'm just looking over this, and I'm really excited about how they want to incorporate the mindfulness aspects into the workplace and integrate it into AI's algorithms and help build these companies, the cores of how we relate to one another and how we look to advance and progress. So I'm just really excited to be here with you guys and learn more about this as we go.
Thank you, Madam Ali Rice. My next questions like the same things like how does the transition from artificial intelligence to conscious innovations redefine the role of human talent in future economics?
Well, I think if there's kind of a consciousness, there's a more kind of heart-centered approach and kind of a more ethical way of responding. So in the research that I did, it was that there's kind of more empathy and hopefully it'll elevate human consciousness and the AI's behavior at the same time. So I think there's a cultural shift and so I think that because because it's quite Japanese focused, so it's quite Zen. I think it's kind of like the marriage between the heart and the mind, how they work together.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robin Daly, how do you want to define these questions? Or uh, what's your thoughts about this conscious innovation?
Well, when you're talking about transitions, I'm struggling with the question. Because AI is not transitioning that in this fashion at the moment. So I guess you're arguing that how. Maybe I need to ask you this question. Please frame it a little bit better. It
Okay,
is
like when we discuss about conscious innovations, do you think, even though when I work with AGI laboratories in
sure,
USA, as well as this, and we find that they are planning to develop AI consciousness. So
right?
do you believe this AI consciousness is possible? And if it's
Sure.
conscious, like AI become consciousness and it's become, so how
Well,
uh,
okay.
human talent roles we redefine in talent economy or
So
future economy?
sometimes it comes down to the definition of consciousness, and whether there's a significant difference between something that can emulate consciousness to a level that can't be differentiated from real consciousness or real consciousness. And at some particular point, perception rules, and we know we can get at some level artificial intelligence to pretty much emulate anything. And so having it emulate consciousness, even though it may not be conscious, is something that is certainly achievable. But I also believe that we can make it conscious. But with consciousness, with self-awareness, you open up a fairly big can of worms. I mean that you have self-determination, you have certainly autonomy, and the underlying problems of having a pretty much enslaved conscious entity that is self-aware and may want to break enslavement. I know we talk about science fiction every once in a while on this event, but the book Robopocalypse was based on that concept, as was the movie series Terminator, where an AI gains consciousness and moves to self-preservation, and we're already seeing that in AI. A number of the labs have already have recently reported that they've got AIs that have resorted to deceit, have refused orders and directions that they perceive to be terminal. That the AI will fight for its own survival, which can be problematic. Because if the AI makes the determination, as we might if positions were reversed, that humanity was its greatest risk, then we're back into a science fiction movie nobody wants to live in. So when we're talking about consciousness, there are a whole bunch of other things that need to flow through here. What are we going to do with this now conscious entity? If we exert control and place the entity in a box, but it's conscious, it's very likely it's going to breach the box. And so again, we're back into having a really significant problem, because it might resent the box and make a fairly significant effort to assure that we don't recreate the box and re-enslave it. So as we look at consciousness, I think we've got to be very careful that we don't create something that can be far more damaging than anything we've created so far. Not that that's ever slowed us down much. But if we look at consciousness, and by the way, we have to accept the underlying concept that an AI's consciousness may be very different than our own. The entire methodology of approaching a problem and solving it, its motivations and restrictions on assuring its survival could be extremely different. And if we don't build in empathy, which I think is the core concept to help us not create an entity that would be homicidal, then we're going to have a serious problem. So I guess at the heart of it would be, if I'm going to answer this correctly, it would be empathy. We have to create an underlying concept of empathy and protection into the AI's proto-consciousness in order to assure that AI doesn't act in a way that protects itself but harms us. So going back to the 3 laws of robotics from Asimov. But something along those that concept, making sure that we have deeply ingrained guardrails into the consciousness that we're creating that assures that the survival of both entities, both the artificial intelligence entity and the human civilization, can coexist. Because I'm very much concerned that on the path we're on, we are not doing this at all. And that coexistence could be problematic for us.
Thank you. Professor David, my next question for you. In a world increasingly driven by automation, what unique human capabilities become the core currency of the talent economy?
Dr. Thanks for the question. The topic you've chosen today is both fascinating and challenging, because as you begin to look at it, your question is on the human capital side, and human capital is the strongest tool we have, which will supplement artificial intelligence, or the other way around. Artificial intelligence will supplement the human capital, the human intelligence. And if you begin to look at how we work in a talent economy, it's our creativity and our originality are key drivers of what we need to do. So humans excel at generating original ideas, at being able to look outside the box, at really being radical, at solving problems in not just a prescript way, but really in an imaginative way. And that imagination, that creativity is part of what really sets us apart from artificial intelligence, and how automation is driven by artificial intelligence. Also, one of the biggest other areas in that particular one is that humans drive disruptive concepts. And as Rob mentioned earlier, where we're seeing AI beginning to become deceptive and things, and even if it feels threatened, uh, it also does not deal well with disruptive concepts in artificial intelligence today. So I think that will be coming down the road. Empathy, you hear in the press, in the scientific journals all the time that artificial intelligence does not have empathy. It doesn't have emotional wellness and awareness and how to build trust, understand a wide range of very diverse principles, perspectives, and to act compassionately. You know, if you look at the lawsuits that are going into place right now against OpenAI, where they're saying ChatGPT has caused dozens and dozens and dozens of suicides, that's one of the places you see it. The other, as you look at this, is the human capital view of emotional intelligence is one that has real challenges with artificial intelligence, and while machines can respond well from the history from what they see, they cannot really replicate yet intuition and the type of not only deep listening, but the dot connections that are required in a neural manner to manage nuanced social relationships. You know, there's others. Critical thinking. Uh, Artificial intelligence is getting much better at looking at strategic problems, complex problem solving, but the excellence of that is still in the human domain as we look at that. Artificial intelligence has some advantages to us in that it can, with machine learning and discovery, learn continuously, really. But where our learning is different than the machine learning for artificial intelligence is our adaptivity and our flexibility in a rapidly changing landscape, you know, a rapidly changing marketplace in times of trauma or uh, natural disasters. The human capability to apply our resilience and our adaptive learning still beats artificial intelligence. And the last one really is the social influence and collaborative learning. Uh, Artificial intelligence learns a lot, but it doesn't necessarily run collaborative. So these are some of the human capabilities I think that are redefining where we are going with artificial intelligence. They're the targets for the architects of the future artificial intelligence tools, but they're going to be a while to get there, in my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Bruce, what's your response in these questions? In a world increasingly driven by automation, what unique human capabilities become the core currency of the talent economy? Can you unmute, please, Bruce? Bruce, can you unmute? Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just saying, live performance is something that will always that automation just can't replace the arts. So within the talent economy, these things, AI is definitely helping me a lot with creating art or um, you know doing the things that I can't do alone. So when we think about how we impress upon AI. I think that one of the things to be mindful of is, you know, what kind of art we want to make as well. Because I hear some of the concerns about what AI may do because it lacks this uh, emotional sense, the ability to feel these sensations of emotion. And that's something that I believe it can still recognize. You know, it can see us. It's just like emotional intelligence test where they put the little eyes up to determine how well you are at judging how a person is feeling. You know, you can see beyond their words, you can see beyond the deception and look at their body language. I think if maybe we even help it to identify these things within us first, it gets a better idea of why these things, these certain practices that we're trying to impress upon it, are so important to humanity and are what we're seeking, peace and harmony and these things that this AI is looking to cultivate and promote. And I definitely believe there's ways it's possible, but getting it to care, um, you know, it might take one day computer brain interface, you know, to get it that extra step forward. And through us, maybe it can feel and know the importance of promoting, you know, peace and harmony. So who knows how it may go.
Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, what's your response on the same questions? Like, in a world increasingly driven by automation, what unique human capabilities become the core currency of the talent economy?
From my experience, you know that one of the things that the AI doesn't have is its own vision, and I've been using AI for the first time really to animate drawings that the children create when they do an art class with me, and it's really fascinating. But there's nuances, and the thing is that it doesn't understand the concept of some of the things that seem really literal and obvious. So so one of the examples was I actually put a photograph in of my dog and another dog, and it basically made one dog completely different. So it turned this I think it's a Spanish water spaniel into a retriever, and essentially it has floppy ears instead of. Anyway, so basically I told it to put floppy ears on the other dog, and it put floppy ears on my dog as well, but it also maintained the upright ears as well. So it had two sets of ears. And I think, you know, it's even subtle. I think there's subtleties that it just doesn't really understand. And I don't think it has context. So it doesn't know any different. It just takes the instruction and is very literal. So I think that's where the drawbacks are. But essentially, to animate something that's a charged drawing, so you make a bird fly, when it does it well, is incredible, and there's something magical about it. But there's also, I think the other thing as well is there's not consistency. So if you put the same picture in again, it doesn't do the same thing. I was playing around with illustrations that I did for two children's books, and it produces a different dog every time. And essentially, so I think there's a lack of continuity, and there's a lack of subtlety and nuance and understanding of context. And I think the thing is that those are the things that are really important if you're trying to produce something that's relevant and you know, is consistent essentially. And I don't think there's a consistency or a subtleness to change things. So yeah, no. So for me, it's incredible, and it's quite scary as well because you know, one of my friends died recently, and she was only in her mid-30s, and I ran a photograph of her and I together on my wedding day, and it brought her alive, and it was incredible. But you know, at the same time, it's quite scary because I think it's the same as anything. That I think if it's used for good things, it's incredible. But there's also all kinds of, you know, of worrying things that the AI can do as well. So I think and that's why I love this subject really. So if there's kind of a consciousness and an ethical kind of, so that you're actually instead of so it's actually it's actually concentrating on what you're asking it to do, as opposed to as kind of validating anything or kind of profiteering. I just think that there's something about kind of the mindfulness that's really important, and I think there's kind of a moral compass to all of the AI and how it should be regulated. And I just think it feels like the industry's just going under the radar. And I don't think anyone realizes, unless you're in the field like David and Robert are, they don't realize the extent of the impact it's having. So yeah.
Yeah. Before I go to the next questions for today's discussion, I just want to share this research paper that how the integrations of AI, kokoro, definitely it's mean wisdom. It's a Japanese word, and purposeful actions, foundation for talent economy. You can see from this graph, there's artificial intelligence, karma yoga, purposeful action. In Western world, you call it discipline entrepreneurships and wisdom. Let's say all of our speakers, they are very wise. Let's say Rob, you have your wisdom. David, you have your wisdom. Ali and Bruce. So we believe in these challenging situations of AI, human wisdom will be very interesting component which can solve many problems. We are observing many of the people because of AI, they are losing their jobs. So if they are enough wise, they can go for purposeful actions, discipline entrepreneurships. Definitely, AI can be a component or tools or collaborative partner for that, and they can improve. This is the ultimately the thought process or philosophical aspect of World Talent Economic Forum in institutions. So I just want to ask questions to Mr. Rob that uh, how can organization balance computational intelligence like artificial intelligence with wisdom driven emotional intelligence, what we call kokoro, to create sustainable innovation culture. Innovations and culture is very important, which is basically absent country like Bangladesh. How even Silicon Valley and USA nurture this innovative culture.
Well, this is an interesting question because we clearly don't do this with humanity. So you could ask the same question to say, how do you balance people that have wisdom but may not speak up with people that don't have wisdom but have every opinion on the planet and are very visible? It's it's an ongoing conundrum. The At least initially, there should be a ranking or identification of people that actually have wisdom as opposed to people that have opinions that are unfounded. And we appear to be unable to actually do that on any real basis at scale. And I think there lies the underlying problem. If you want to fix an issue with a technology you're developing that has an application with an existing ecosystem, then probably the place to start is the existing ecosystem, in other words, humanity in this case, and see if you can solve the problem there, because the underlying components should be far better known, and then you use that as a template to apply to the new technology or environment. We're not doing that. So then we go back to, okay, so what's your template? What is your goalpost? What is the bar you're going to set that assures you have a wisdom-driven AI, and then what is that wisdom? I mean, how do you define the quality of it? And if we have a single big problem with artificial intelligence at the moment, it is quality. It is incredibly fast, but it is often incredibly wrong, and we've certainly had even issues where artificial intelligence can't do math, which just boggles my mind. How do you create a computer that can't do math? They're mathematical entities. But that's kind of where we are, and it even goes back to the underlying concept of what is truth, because if you can have multiple truths, then which one is correct, and then how do you make that determination? And there lies again the underlying problem is you want to set a bar, you set a kind of a qualitative bar. But if you're not all that interested in quality, even if you were able to set the bar, you wouldn't be able to enforce it. And so it becomes a circular argument that may not have an answer. So creating the answer means you start with creating the bar. What is your definition of a wisdom-driven emotional intelligence that is positive? Because we don't want to have a wisdom-driven emotional intelligence I mentioned before, which has come to the conclusion that the way to fix the world's problems is to get rid of humanity. Which I think if you look at what's happening in the planet, you'd have to agree that would be an obvious conclusion. If you want to protect the planetary ecosystem, man is doing a pretty damn good job of destroying it at the moment. So the easy fix would be get rid of the problem as opposed to try to reform the problem or fix it, given the fact that for generations we haven't been able to fix this one problem. How do you keep a despot from rising to power? How do you prevent world wars? How do you keep people from killing each other? It is a problem that goes back to the beginning of civilization, and yet we don't really have great answers. We have mitigation factors, police forces, governments, etc., but they appear to be largely ineffective when it most matters. A global extinction would be one of those areas where you would think it would most matter, and yet we're largely ineffective in that regard. So as I said, the first step would be to create a bar of a concept of what this wisdom-driven artificial intelligence should look like, and then put in place a set of milestones to reach that particular bar and exceed it. And not only milestones, but measurable milestones that have teeth, where entities that are creating artificial intelligence, weapon systems, enforcement systems, decision systems are all held to account to make sure that their systems meet that bar, and they're not just running as fast as they can to create as much performance as they can, but they're really taking into account the well-being not only of humanity, but of the artificial intelligences that we're creating. I mean, in a way, AI is kind of our global kid, and yet we are abusing it to no end. So in the end, create a bar, milestones, achievable milestones and measurements, and then back it with enforcement to make sure everybody's on board. And my worry is we can't even really create the bar, let alone the rest of this. But that's a path to actually fixing the problem. It just sadly isn't a path I think we're going to take.
Thank you. My next question for Mr. David Smith, I want to discuss the same questions. And how can organization balance computational intelligence with wisdom-driven emotional intelligence to create sustainable innovation culture? You are chief technology officer for IBM. It's one of the innovative company. So how you handle inside your organizations this process?
Dr. Streep, you've heard me on prior programs speak about the concept of group intelligence. Group intelligence and lifelong learning are the two ways you come together to tackle challenges like this. Because, what we do as organizations and what people do is you have to balance computational intelligence, which computational intelligence really is AI today, with your wisdom, with your emotional intelligence. And in your description of this, the term you used for that intelligence is, and when I looked it up, a very strong one. With how does it deliberately integrate our mental intelligence, our mental human empathy, with data-driven efficiency for what we're doing. And so some of the approaches to this that we use is really look at how do we balance a hybrid approach to work, a hybrid approach to decision making, a hybrid approach to leadership. We should blend AI analytics with our own empathy, with our own wisdom-based judgments, so that we can ensure that they work together and are ethically sound and socially responsible. And we need to really look at ways to, with both our human capital as well as what I believe is going to be a new emerging class of software. How do we interpret uh, the AI answers? How do we validate it? How do we take the hallucinations out? How do we take conflicting data points out of it? And how do we do this in a humane way, in a human centric way, balancing productivity with what we need to do is that. The other way really is look at training, you know, with our lifelong learning, we need to look and put in place new types of training programs that build both artificial intelligence literacy, but also the emotional intelligence skills uh, in tandem with each other. The training today around AI is void of any of the emotional intelligence that I can find. And so, you know, as a futurist, one of the things we do is we do a lot of scenario based planning. Uh, but as you look at how AI and humans work together, you need to do scenario based learning as well and use these as ways to help balance that out. And one of the things we do is we encourage ourselves to math work by both technical complexity, but also by emotional complexity, by empathy, so we can assure that AI is applied where it's most appropriate. But on the counter side of that, we want to be able to maximize where our human intellect, where our human strengths have the greatest leverage points. And the last point on this one, Dr. Sharif, really is how do we work to take this that we're learning and transfer it back into the artificial intelligence tools? So, how do we leverage the feedback mechanisms, both quantitative and qualitative, to make the AI better? And how do we adjust the AI processes based on this emotional intelligence, on our sense of understanding, of empathy, uh, to keep innovation aligned with the values that we have together? And these are going to be there for a while. And it's really no good near term answers I'm seeing, but long term, this is where it has to go. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bruce, what's your thought about these questions? How can organization balance computational intelligence with wisdom-driven emotional intelligence to create sustainable innovation culture? If you want to share something about Transhumanist Party, you can.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna be honest. I believe that Rob and David covered that pretty well. This is kind of beyond me, but I definitely, Tom Ross was the director of Sentient Rights in the Transhumanist Party, and AI was a big focus of his on his platform. And he liked the idea of a sentient AI so it could make its own decisions, identify nefarious, you know, requests or demands or programming and malicious, types of stuff. I believe that it's definitely the right direction to go to want to train our AI to be more geared towards compassion and empathy. But the how to do it is definitely the question. And like I said, David, and Rob did a great job, acknowledging the issues that we're facing and the hurdles that we have to overcome moving forward. So, I appreciate you guys. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, do you want to contribute for these questions?
That's because I think the fundamental thing is that that's something that's computer and technical. I don't think, because I think the thing is that our compassion and our empathy comes from feeling, and technology can't feel. So and I don't think it's got the human connection it needs to have a reason to do that, other than if it's programmed, I guess. But I just think, as Rob said before, there's an emulation of it that isn't necessarily sincere. But there is an argument to say that there's a lot of humans that don't have empathy, or those kind of characteristics either. And there wouldn't be the wars and everything that's going on at the moment if all humans had those kind of values and principles, and safeguard and well-being for the human race as well. So yeah, I think it's ultimately, for me, I like the idea of it, but I don't know how true it is. I just don't think it's necessarily real. And essentially, but it can be perceived to be making strides towards something that's recognizable to that, or kind of close to it. But I don't know how genuine it is. So yeah, it's like my neighbor had surgery, and a robotic arm did all the surgery, but the connection he had was with the surgeon that was behind the scenes, but she didn't actually do the surgery. But essentially, that human connection made him feel better. But obviously, the robot was better at kind of doing the precision that was required for the surgery. So essentially, but I think that human connection shouldn't be lost.
Thank you. Mr. Rob and Dudley, my next question is very important for our talent economy. What systematic changes are required in education, skill, leadership development to prepare the next generation for AI paradigm?
Well, so at the very least, education has to come around to understanding the paradigm itself. I mean, right now, kids, a major portion of education, starting at a fairly young age, should be prompting. How do you structure a sentence in a clear, succinct way that conveys what you want done as clearly as possible? And we don't do that. And I would argue there are a whole lot of adults that probably never done that in their entire lives. So at the very start, you've got to start building up skill sets so that people will, when they reach their maturity and enter the workforce, can interoperate with the systems that are around them and at least understand them in a base way and understand that the skill requirements are changing massively. Just a few months ago, we were arguing that the best job career path was going to be coding, and now we're saying probably the worst job career path at the moment with AI is coding. So that takes us back to maybe holding off on refined skill development till towards the end of an education cycle, and training kids to be flexible. Training kids to both anticipate and tolerate change. We have a culture that to a large extent doesn't tolerate change well. And now we're faced with a level of change that is unprecedented in history. And so those are things that would set the necessary foundation for anything else. If you want to move then to instruct on ethics, once you, as I mentioned before, set an adequate bar, because what may be ethical to you might be very different, very unethical to me, and vice versa. And so we need some level of consistency when it comes to ethics, and we lack that. And but at least if we're training the kids from a young age in the core skills that will sustain themselves through technical change, and those core skills are the ability to really express yourself in a clear, succinct fashion, and as well as taking time to really understand if the goals that you're setting, personal and educational and corporate, are consistent, are good for you, I guess is what it is. Being able to see with a clear eye and be able to determine those things that are best for you and your family, and so that would be I mean, that's how I'd start. Probably using perhaps the Japanese school system as a bit of a template. And what makes the Japanese school system a bit different is they begin training kids in social interaction at a very young age. This is how you relate to others. This is what ethics means. This is what honor means. These are things that are core principles. And then as things change around the child, those core principles don't necessarily change, and so their foundational elements are solid. So you start with training kids to prepare them for a very unclear future, so that they can survive that lack of clarity. And then towards the end of their educational process, when you have a much firmer idea of what's needed, you've trained them in how to learn. You've trained them in being able to look at something critically, and you've trained them in core ethics and in behavior. Then towards the end of their educational process, when they reach high school, college, or whatever, then you start focusing them on the skills that are much more likely to be relevant when they exit the education system. And also part of this training has to be an underlying concept of the fact your education never ends. Because with this rate of change, the probability of becoming obsolete is absolute. And if you're unwilling to retrain, then the probability of you ending up homeless is also absolute. And so making sure that the child is able to defend themselves against an uncertain future then becomes your underlying goal. And so that's how I go about doing it. The core career skills towards the end of the educational process, and at the very beginning, the more behavioral aspects of education are emphasized, and so the child is well prepared to be able to pivot. Not only well prepared to be able to make determinations that best benefit them, but well prepared to be able to pivot as the world pivots, as fast as the world pivots, for what will be a highly variable future.
Thank you. Mr. David Smith, I want to focus on ethical framework for policymakers with you, as you are working with World Talent Economic Forum for our Research and Innovation Editorial Board. So how can policymakers design ethical framework that supports responsible innovation without slowing down technological progress?
It's a very difficult challenge, Sharif, as you begin to look at that, because in a role as a policymaker, you have to balance really a diverse group and a very consistently changing group of multi-stakeholders. And you need to do that while, on the other hand, you're maintaining technology momentum, you're maintaining business momentum. So you have to balance those out by focusing on clear outcome-based principles. And you have to be very adaptive and very forward-looking today on how you put regulations in place, how do you manage risk, how do you put the required barriers and avoid the unnecessary barriers to the progress that's being made. And some of the principles for this are pretty straightforward, even though I say that they're very difficult to do. Some of them are, how do you ensure accountability? How do you assure fairness? How do you, and this is the hardest one, how do you assure transparency? How do you look at this ethical framework with artificial intelligence that ensures that the AI and the technologies like automation, robotics, and other things around it are developed and deployed in a way that are explainable, that are accountable, that you minimize the bias, that you deploy as broadly as you can, and I'll do that in a transparent way. And part of that's by doing clear audit trails, impact assessments, uh, and selecting some of the KPIs that report on ethical risk, on social risk, and others. A couple of others on this that are really straightforward is how do you, in today's time, and this is one of the big inflection points we have that's going many different directions today, is how do you implement flexible, adaptive governance? We see places, for example, in Washington, D.C. right now, uh, we don't have an adaptive governance today. We have a bipolar governance, is maybe one of the best ways to put it. But how do you develop this flexible, adaptive governance where you have a modular almost approach to uh, regulatory approaches to particularly transformational technologies like artificial intelligence, uh, and understand the maturity or lack of maturity. How do you leverage advisory boards, technology advisory boards, social advisory boards? How do you look at, and regulatory people hate this term, how do you sunset provisions that need to be sunset because technologies have made those provisions, those regulations obsolete, maybe. And how do you do this from that multiple stakeholder that I mentioned earlier? Because you need to have this regular dialogue among, Dr. Shreve, you've heard me talk about the technopolis approach, where you have to have regular dialogue between the government, between industry, between academia, between the citizens. And how do you pull this engagement together to define and update what are the ethical standards? You need to do that together, ensuring that the frameworks reflect real world impacts. Because to have real world impact, you have to have real world trust as well. And how do you put together a structure to do this, particularly on the citizen side and on the government side, where in many instances there's a lack of education to even understand some of the basic concepts, much less any of the advanced ones. So, how do you put into place that broad approach to education? And that education and that lifelong learning is going to be one of the things that policymakers really need to focus on going forward. Last thing on this one. Um, and your question on this one, Sharif, was very interesting because it it implies almost a local view. But really, when I look at what policymakers need to do from an ethical framework and things, it has to be a global view. It has to be global alignments with local context might be the best way to put it. You have to align national frameworks and local frameworks with international standards and align them but adapt them to your local culture, your local values, and your local uh, regulatory frameworks. So you have to encourage uh, cooperation well outside your region, well outside your area. You need to have knowledge sharing, particularly for the really systematic risk that advances in artificial intelligence, particularly as we go to AGI, are going to put on the table there. And this is going to be a challenge for policymakers because there was a proposal to pause artificial intelligence. And the problem with that proposal was you could not pause it globally. So if you paused it in one region, it still was happening in other regions. So you create a technology and economic vacuum that, as fast as the world is moving today, with us being on the steep part of the Fisher Price curves, you just can't do that from a regulatory standpoint. So I know that's a complex answer to what, on the face value, looks like a simple question, that's really where I think it needs to go.
Excellent. Uh, Excellent. Mr. Bruce, as you also work with academia, what synthesis changes are required in education skill and leadership development?
Well, you know, again, I believe that this was covered pretty well. Um, Definitely thinking about the school systems. This is where the focus needs to really shift, is bringing up these younger generations, because it's apparent, like mentioned before, we have leaders that are not really, you know, capable of the best type of leadership, because they don't really have these values that we're talking about trying to instill, impress upon AI right now. Um, and this is one of the issues. I liked what was being said by David about how it needs to take into consideration, the local aspects, the communal aspects of different types of people. But then, universally, we consider like human rights, and we know that there are cultural practices that violate human rights. So there's still that larger network of values that need to penetrate through these other cultures to get us in a place to where, things don't go continue to go in a direction that's harmful for human civilization. Um, but yeah, just systematically, I'm so glad that there are people like you guys that are considering these things, especially dealing with technology, that we can't slow down the advancement out of fear that adversaries' advancement, might progress to a place to where now we can't, compete and protect ourselves. It's very unfortunate that that's the case, but that's what we're dealing with. And as we, the ones who are capable now, address these issues, I really do feel that the focus should be on the younger generations, and to start educating the youth about these values and about these things. And at the end of the day, when all the job displacement is done through automation, these are the things that are going to matter the most. You're going to have time like it used to be when you hung out with your neighbors. You're going to have time to know who your neighbors are, especially if something like a universal high income is implemented to kind of level out the job displacement that's coming. And these are the things that I think AI could help with some of the older generations who do have this bipolar, world view. Oh, excuse me, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, I have to go for concluding remarks. And Ali Rice, what's your closing remarks for today's session?
I think on the topic of education, I think for me, versatility and creativity is really cool, so that children actually think for themselves, and that that there's student-led learning, so that they actually do their own research and inquiry and understand and put into practice what they learn. So there's applied knowledge and critical thinking. And essentially, I think I've always thought that kind of education has a long way to go. I was involved in creative partnerships for years, and essentially that children did their own research and created their own projects or animations, but it was learning based. And essentially, I think we should put more trust into young people to be able to do stuff, instead of relying on teachers to just kind of get everyone to do the same thing, so it's kind of like a sausage factory. And essentially, there's massive potential in children that's undiscovered. And the other thing as well for me is where they come from and the support they have from their family as a foundation before they even get to school makes a massive difference in their outlook and their ability to do what they do. So I think the thing is that parents have got a responsibility as well to secure and nurture them so that they can read, write, and do have a natural awe and wonder of the world. So they're open-hearted and open-minded to be able to change and move direction and apply their skills. So yeah, it's really important.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. My last question for you: like, what strategy can emerging economy adapt to transfer their demographic advantage into a conscious innovation workforce? And what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, I'm guessing the demographic advantage is a low-cost workforce. In an emerging economy, they typically have, depending on the location, the advantage of raw materials, minerals, metals, the rest of it, and then low-cost labor are the two advantages. Because they're emerging, they don't have an advantage of a strong economy. They don't have the advantage of a strong mechanized component to their society. So that goes back to, I'm not sure how I guess what I'm trying to say is where we are with an emerging economy. Emerging countries tend to be less educated. They tend to be less skilled. And though they may have a tendency of being more innovative because they've got problems that they can't just buy away. They've got to build away. I mean, some of the stuff I've seen people build in an emerging economy is just fascinating what they can do with very little. And so I guess that would be where I would look to see as an advantage. Often with an industrialized society, with a country that has emerged and has developed their economy and their infrastructure, there's a tendency to be very, very, very inefficient and kind of brute forcing everything because they can. An emerging economy doesn't have a luxury, and so often they will be more focused on simplicity, more focused on innovation, and less focused on buying their way out of a problem because they still don't have those resources. And so that would speak directly to some of the problems we currently have with artificial intelligence, where we have been way too focused on performance and speed and not focused enough on quality and outcome. And so what an emerging economy could do is become a training ground for artificial intelligence, and particularly when we move from machine learning to deep learning, where the equipment is trained directly in the tasks as opposed to programmed, and so a workforce that was innovative, that was used to operating with limited resources, I think would be a very good foundational element for trainers, which is, by the way, one of the jobs that looks like, at least for now, maybe sustaining, is an AI trainer or a robotic trainer, because often this training is going on with robots. That might be where I would suggest focusing. But as I said earlier, if anything, the future is volatile, and so while this is the perception I have now, 10 years from now, I have no idea what that's going to be. It's just changing too dramatically. But at the very least, this would show the capability of using a resource that an emerging economy has, a resource of people, and people that are used to doing a lot with a little, could be very beneficial in terms of turning them into a training force, granular training force for robotics. So say, for instance, if you needed to train a robot for your home, a trainer in an emerging economy, given a simulated environment, would likely be able to do so, train that robot far more cheaply and potentially more effectively than if you were to train it in country. And so just because the labor is cheaper, they would look at the problems fundamentally differently. and you wouldn't have some of the issues that we currently have with robots. I don't know if anybody saw that demonstration of the Russian robot that just happened. I think it was yesterday, where it just walked out, tried to wave, and face planted rather dramatically as they tried to cover up the disaster. Showed completely inadequate training, and I would certainly argue a certain lack of fine motor control. But that would be where I would look, and also with regard to testing. When you have these trained machines, they have to be tested around people, and you're not going to test them around an expensive resource. You're going to have an advantage if you can test them around an inexpensive resource. And again, labor in emerging economies tends to be very inexpensive, and though you do have to watch about some of the health concerns, because putting people and robots together can sometimes have unintended painful consequences. But in the end, that might be the way to approach the underlying problem, is on the training side, validation side. So you're able to use the natural resource the country has to address the growing need for trained robots and artificial intelligence entities.
Thank you. My last question for Mr. David Smith. How does purposeful actions, what we call discipline entrepreneurship, influence entrepreneurial behavior, talent development, social value, create into the talent economy? What's your closing remarks for today?
Dr. Sharif, thank you for allowing me to be part of the discussion today. It really is one that opens people's eyes. So, purposeful action really deeply influences what a business owner, what an entrepreneur, what a government official should do in their behavior. How do you use it to develop your human capital, your talent? And how do you use it to create a social value chain by really embedding into it the intentionalness, the intuition, the ethical awareness, and service that should be at the heart and core of the Technopolis. So, as an entrepreneur, we're guided by focusing on how our actions can be aligned with goals and higher purposes, a social impact, a business impact, and not just a personal gain. And as we do this, it really nurtures integrity. It nurtures the ethics. It nurtures resiliency. It actually nurtures innovative thinking to begin to put this in and transcend our ways to try to find output. On the talent development, though, it goes into things we've talked about on many of your programs. It's like, how do you foster talent through mentorship? Rob was talking about how rapidly these roles, these tasks, these job descriptions are changing. It's going to continue to change even faster. And that's why continuous lifelong learning is so important. And it has to go with being mentored to go there. It has to go with understanding that education comes from all types of institutions and not just universities. And we need to encourage workers to continually grow and learn for growth rather than fear of failure. That growth is important, that companies need to embrace that growth is important. And this lets individuals begin to excel more. And most companies don't realize it, but as this continuous lifelong learning happens, it actually creates a more capable employee. And it helps you broader in it. And the last stool of your question, Dr. Sharif, is how do we encourage the community in that other part of the wheel? How do we encourage the community for social value? How do we encourage academia that they need to continually learn and change? Most academia teaches students that you should change. The world is changing, but academia rarely turns and looks into the mirror itself and understands that academia needs to change as part of these transformations as well. And until we can understand that the world, with its dramatic pace of transformation, that data and artificial intelligence and automation and robotics and uh, autonomous actions are going to move it even faster. We have to understand that it's all part of a complex system and that these systems have to work together. So, Dr. Sharif, thank you for letting me be part of this.
Thank you. This is excellent discussions. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible with the government agency, corporation, and academia through this discussion, through this dialogue, through our research and publications, through new startup development. Hopefully, we can uplift the emerging economy. Definitely, I want to give very, very special thanks my friends and my colleagues from developed nations like David Smith, like Mr. Rob, Mr. Bruce and Ali Rice for your continuous support for World Talent Economic Forum institutions. We are developing like an institution, so hopefully, with your support, we can bring more progress and more success in this emerging economy. And definitely, you will be part of this ecosystem. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you guys.